Hey folks, MasakoX here. I bet you're getting annoyed about us talking about this, but the latest chapter of the manga has kind of made us have to do so. Yes, I'm very much aware that the saga isn't done yet, but we can certainly put together something about this particular plot thread now, since it seems to have reached its conclusion. Well, I mean, at least for now. And all we have to say is, why? Why did it all have to be here of all places? Stick around and hear us out, okay? And maybe subscribe for more Dragon Ball content and the like. Cheers. So, you know how we've been very positive about the Granola the Survivor arc up until recently? Especially at the very beginning of the story? Haverock and I state on the record that a lot of stuff in the first half of the arc, pretty much until chapter 76 or so, feels like it still holds its own today. The idea of a character that is only loosely connected to Saiyans, and that Goku has to take a back seat for once and play the team game, in this, yeah, that was compelling, whilst also getting some indirect Saiyan context and background. The original Bardock illusions were minimal and thusly were the most potent. Having that one shot of Bardock, but only the hardcore fans noticing it at once, in his monkey form, that was really classy. But as for the last couple of chapters, yeah, the nicest thing we can say right now is that it seems more than likely that we are at least going to get the three main pro tags working together. It's not going to be solely Goku. That is if Granola wakes up from his nap. It's kind of funny actually. I completely blanked out Granola in that chapter since he wasn't actively featured other than a couple of panels. That's how little I had noticed him, and I actually forgot for a second he was in his own saga. Oops. But this does raise up another point, and why I mostly likely did that. You see, Granola has been out of action for like 3 months up to this point. The manga's release schedule really doesn't help with perception on what's going on. It really doesn't. It honestly feels more like half a year since we last saw Granola do something. And it seems that his own story about his own kind of shortcomings has been pushed to the background for the time being, whilst the Saiyans are busy having their delayed time to shine. Because they really need it, don't they? Forgive the churlish remarks, folks. We really like to see the manga experimenting with different stories and trying out new things. We really do. But this arc's final act is really giving me serious GT vibes here. Wait, what do you mean, Masako? I thought you started to become a bit more forgiving about GT. Well, it's only about one particular thing, mind, about GT. Like we stated in other discussions, the showrunners of GT originally wanted to try and rekindle the old Dragon Ball adventure spirit in a modern form factor, which was in space. That's a fair and very ambitious idea. But then they gave up after 3 episodes when they realised something. They lacked the Toriyama touch. Go back to GT, and you can see around about episode 16, when the series starts to feel less like its original intentions and more like Z. Oh dear. This is what I'm starting to see here. History repeating. And do you want to know the kicker? Why Have and I are so jaded and disillusioned right now? Well, because, surprise, surprise, the true moral behind the Granola the Survivor arc story had nothing to do with Granola at all. It was a story that revolved around Saiyan pride all along. Saiyan pride. I think we've been here before. Have we been here before? One nice thing I can say is that at least the medium of this revelation, being telegraphed to us, was something clever. All thanks to a recording from Bardock's scouter, instead of just Monaito telling them what happened. But nevertheless, the contents of said scouter, plus ramblings from an old Bardock fanboy, contribute to Goku finally understanding and accepting his Saiyan pride. Granted, if this happened in another arc or even its own mini-arc, fine. That's okay. It's its own self-contained story beat. But when it's happening in another saga, and it completely detracts from the original intentions of said saga, that's where it's jarring. I don't mind Goku discovering more about his past, but it should be like Aladdin King of Thieves, its own movie, or its own little story. Vegeta then gets in on the act and realizes that his burden that he had been struggling with all saga is not that he should be ashamed of the sins of all the Saiyans, which he did admit to with Beerus back when he was training with the cat and trying to learn about Hakai techniques. But instead, he should be fueled by the Saiyan pride. Now, on the surface, that doesn't so bad to you, does it? He should own his heritage. But there is a catch to that. What does that even mean nowadays? Yes, at this point, we could go off on a rant for a few minutes, but I think Totally Not Mark said it best on Twitter. So we give credit to him for where we shall go in this discussion. We surmise from his statements that it's becoming less and less obvious what the pride Vegeta is striving for is at this point. Is it the old interpretation of pride from back in the day, of the conquest and domination that Saiyans were good at? Or is it to do with their honour and passion, the more valiant aspects of Saiyanhood, the battle that can ride through any adversity? It's not all that clear anymore. There are bits and pieces knocking around the prince's mind, but nothing concrete that we can get behind anymore. It's another case of going around in circles with pride being the watchword. It's just like in the case of the whole friendship spiel at the end of the anime run of the Tournament of Power. In the end, friendship won out, and that's what Jiren learned. The characters are just speaking words at this point, talking for the sake of talking. I'm sorry, but at this point, Saiyan pride is just noise. Yeah. It reminds me of Goku's impression of Vegeta in DBZA. Blah 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 pride, oh, I wish I were a carrot. It's that now. And it's all simply down to it not being conveyed adequately to us, the readers. What we're supposed to feel about this pride. Are we meant to feel emboldened by this? Pleased? Proud ourselves? What? Granted, there might be something lost in translation, as it were, that we're not fully understanding since we are not immersed in Japanese culture. That's fine. We're not trying to imply that the translators of the manga, though, are doing a bad job, we must say that. They are doing their best to localize the script in a manner that works in the West, whilst also attempting to try and remain true to the core message of the original text. It might be more something to do with something being lost on a cultural level that no translator can totally replicate, or at least not fluidly. After all, Dragon Ball is a Japanese property, and it is rooted in a certain system of values and morals that differ from ours, as it has been pointed out by the likes of Derek Badula or Geekdom several times over the years. You can find many examples of Taoistic principles in Dragon Ball. That being said, both Toriyama and Toyotaro are known for being influenced by media from not just Japan, but from across the world, especially Western media, like Star Wars, Marvel, you name it. So for this discussion, we are viewing their culture through our lens, just as much as Toriyama and Toyotaro view our works through their lenses. It's all to do with their own interpretation, and our interpretation. And culture itself is also about reading stories from different points of view, and different lights. So this might be us not having the cultural key to fully understanding all this, but if that's not the case, then this all feels kind of jarring. Because this chapter has been pointing at Vegeta going through some kind of self-acceptance, in spite of his people's legacy. It looked as if Goku was going through a lesson in humility, which was fascinating. Knowing when to take a step back and allow others to deal with their problems on their terms. Having faith in them, instead of blindly trying to solve their problems for them without knowing the full picture. Had it been that former thing, it would have been great and incredibly subtle. But nope! It was Saiyan pride all along! Also, another thing, which is heavily reviled almost every single time it comes up, is messing with the backstory of a well-established character in a long continuity. And this isn't exclusive to Dragon Ball. It's possible everywhere and in every medium. You know that moment in your favourite story where there's this character that you've been following for years or maybe even decades, pretty much your entire life, and you know them pretty much down to a T. But then in one publication, everything changes when it's revealed that their backstory was completely different, all because the creator wanted to shake things up just for the sake of it. For example, Marvel's Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver have had their Prime Timeline backstory changed over and over again, mostly due to the movie rights issues, to be fair, so there is a reason. But I'm sure that this is not the only example that you can recall. And I'm pretty certain all of you know what I have in mind for this part of the discussion. Unless you are rebooting a franchise completely, making an entirely new version of these characters, simply meddling with just one thing in that past, just for shock value and personal curiosity, it never works. The whole Bardock wish thing, that was pretty inane. Yeah, okay, sure. It doesn't take away all the accomplishments of Kid Goku throughout Dragon Ball. He did a lot on his own. But now we are learning that Goku basically had plot armor all the way through Z, and it's kinda, I don't know, anticlimactic? Turns out he wasn't so special after all. He was just lucky. And Raditz definitely got the shorter end of the power pole in that one. Granted, he probably lived longer than he would have done without said wish, but no amount of wishes can protect you when your brother and his big green teammate want you gone. I guess it's kind of poetic though, that what killed them both was them meeting in person. Had they never met, they probably would have gone on to have decent lives, or just lived. But did we really need that wish to be a thing? Did it enrich the story in any way? Because here's the thing. The only way I can see this being perfectly resolved is that Monaito never actually heard Bardock's wish properly and instead did something else, but that's up in the air right now. Because here's the thing. Our favourite definition of a retcon is that you should always take something away from a part of an established story and replace it with something new instead. But before you do that, you usually need to ask yourself the question, is that new bit of lore that you're going to be adding worth taking away the old stuff? Because if it's not, then don't do it. Despite Dragon Ball being more happy-go-lucky in its original modus operandi, it also had one of the biggest marvels of the universe going for it. That Goku was originally this insignificant Saiyan child, who then went to achieve great things despite his caste. And now, the makers choose to undermine that specialness? Seriously? You know what? I think I liked it more when Goku was special, because of the way his upbringing had managed to shape him, versus a wish taking care of all of that for him. It didn't matter what he did, really. A wish fixed things for him. In fact, you could say it sort of reflects a little bit what we did for a What If series. The one where Raditz went to Earth instead of Goku, and when we had him wish for Kakarot to be protected, never come to harm, as a means to make up for his own mistake, and as a result, Kakarot gained plot armor. It could be coincidental, but I'm just saying. And aside from being pompous, here's the even bigger question. Did Goku survive the Ultra Divine Water because of the wish, or because of his genuine potential? Was Kami genuinely interested in Goku? Or was it simply because he was being manipulated by Torombo's meddling? That one wish recontextualizes the whole initial part of the story, and I'm not sure if overcomplicating that part was the right thing to do. Okay, at the time you might have been going, oh, that's so wholesome, it makes you feel all fuzzy inside. But then when you step back and go, wait a minute, domino effect, the what if kind of thing? Yeah, I saw that coming. It's like, ooh, that's not good. As a self-promoting side note though, we'll probably ignore this in our what ifs this wish, because oh boy, my head hurts already just thinking of the ramifications. I don't think even the person who decided this retcon was fully aware of the narrative consequences. I write person instead of Toyotaro because there is a strong, not 100% mind, chance that this came from Toriyama, this idea, but we don't know until they tell us specifically, so don't go blaming Toyotaro right out of the gate. But neither do we want to defend Toyotaro all that much, since there are still issues with a lot of his previous stuff, and you can see Zykorisms here and there in the story. But we also know that the OG author is ultimately at the reins of this saga with this bullet point style of writing. They've got to write to it. And we feel it's kind of unfair for the fandom to have this feeling that it's solely Toyotaro equals bad and repetitive, whereas Toriyama is always good and original because he created the thing. Because here's the thing. Toriyama came up with Minus, which included that scene. And then we see that scene again in Broly, the movie where Toriyama was allegedly heavily involved in. And now we see it again, in this arc. 3 times this same sequence of events have shown up: 2014, 2018, 2022. Every 4 years we're being reminded about that moment. Seems like a little bit of an obsession, don't you think? Granted, I like how Broly enhanced what Minus had offered because that was incredibly vague and ill thought out. At least the Broly movie added some very important context and improved Bardock's logic about what he did. But now, we're getting even more context? I'm not sure we needed that. Was it necessary? The Broly version was enough. And like, even if all of the appearances of the scene have been decided by different people, it still gives off the feeling of a franchise that is obsessing over that particular frame. I can't think of any other scene being pushed so hard in the story of Dragon Ball. even the original Super Saiyan transformation. And not only that, but what started as an anti-Superman story has now become a Superman story. It's almost like someone is showing us that scene and saying, "Look how iconic this is! Isn't it iconic? Oh, look! It's Goku leaving Planet Vegeta! Feel stuff! It's iconic!" Like we said, we were originally thrilled about that first Bardock cameo at the beginning of the saga, in his Grade 8 form, thinking it may be able to add new context to Granola's story. What it ultimately did though, instead of being an enriching experience of the lore, it became the narrative equivalent of Grand Theft Auto, with poor Granola being left beaten up on the pavement. And look, we know that Goku is the main character of this franchise, but we have seen good examples of him taking a back seat in order for other characters to, you know, get some development and a chance to do stuff. The Broly movie is a great example of this. Goku plays a supporting role there. He still is important and still does badass things, but our focus is still on Broly in that movie. Here, well, we're truly scared that the lesson taken from this chapter will be that Saiyans are cool, and it's wrong to take revenge against them. Yeah, Granola was misguided and intentionally annoying at times, but it was supposed to be his journey. The Broly movie handled the flashback aspect and the story of this new protagonist in a much better way. We got snippets of the lives of other characters, instead of them overtaking the story of our big boy. Here, it's just a festival of weird decisions at the very end of it. Again, we were worried that Chapter 84 was going to be much worse. It could have been worse. The last few chapters did leave us with a sour taste in our mouths, due to them changing a lot about the continuity, and not in a good way. Unlike with Oob, where it made perfect sense. It made sense in the Moro Saga to add that because Oob and the Lord of Lords, or the Grand Supreme Kai, did not have that much story about them to begin with. You could easily add stuff. There are enough blanks to fill up for us to not feel like everything that we knew was being subverted. It enriched things. So yeah, it's not like we're going to be hating on the manga now, but some of the more questionable decisions here have just silenced our hype. And honestly, it was more effective in doing that than the whole sensu bean malarkey with Moro. As of right now, we are awaiting the final chapters, and it seemed that this saga was very well planned for like 2/3 of its run, and it seems that the ending is just being stuck on for some reason, that they're hoping for the best. Whether or not this was caused by the postponing of the movie and they have to drag out the saga a little longer, we will never know. We doubt it, as the two are different animals right now, but we shall wait to see if it manages to stick the landing. That's the most important part, because the Moro Saga did it, kinda. But can we still get this train back on track? We shall have to wait and see. And I will see you in the next video. Catch you later!